On the day of my wife's funeral, her boss called me and said, "I found something, come to my office right now." Then he added, "And do not tell your son or your daughter-in-law. You could be in danger." When I got there and saw who was standing at the door, I froze. My name is Wallace King. I am 71 years old, and I thought I knew everything about the woman I had shared my bed with for 40 years. Beatrice was simple, quiet, and loyal, or so I believed. She worked as an executive assistant for 30 years, never asking for a raise, never complaining about overtime. But standing in the polished chrome elevator of the Pierce Technology Tower, rising toward the 50th floor, I was about to learn that my entire marriage had been a cover for something much bigger. The man waiting for me, Jonathan Pierce, was a billionaire tech mogul known for eating competitors for breakfast. He did not make personal calls to retired auditors like me, not unless the world was ending. When the elevator doors slid open, Jonathan was not sitting behind his desk. He was pacing. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and fear. "Wallace," he said, his voice low. "Beatrice was not just my assistant. She was the one who built this company. And she left something behind that has put a target on your back." I tried to ask what he meant, but he held up a hand, silencing me. He walked to the heavy oak door of his private conference room. "You need to see this first." He opened the door. I expected to see lawyers. I expected to see stacks of legal documents. Instead, I saw a young woman, maybe 25 years old, rocking a baby in her arms. Her eyes were red from crying. When she saw me, she flinched. I did not know her. But when I looked at the baby, I saw the undeniable shape of my own nose, the same chin that I saw in the mirror every morning. My knees buckled. Jonathan caught me by the arm. "Meet Sierra," he whispered, "and meet your grandson, the one Brandon swore to kill if he did not get his inheritance by midnight tonight." If you are watching this video, please like and subscribe to my channel, and tell me in the comments where you are listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has traveled. Let me back up to 4 hours ago. The rain at the cemetery was relentless. It was a cold, gray downpour that soaked through my black wool coat and chilled me to the bone. I stood by the open grave, watching the mahogany casket being lowered into the wet earth. Beatrice, my bee, was gone. A heart attack took her in her sleep 3 days ago. I felt like half of my soul had been ripped away, leaving a jagged, bleeding wound. But as I looked around the small group of mourners, I realized I was the only one crying. To my right stood my son, Brandon. He was 40 years old, dressed in a designer suit that I knew he could not afford. He was checking his watch. Every 30 seconds he would glance at his wrist and then tap his foot impatiently. He looked bored. He looked like a man waiting for a bus, not a son burying his mother. Next to him was Vanessa, my daughter-in-law. She was holding a black umbrella, but she was not sharing it with me. She was typing furiously on her phone, her long acrylic nails clicking against the screen. I could hear her sighing loudly, complaining about the mud ruining her shoes. I wanted to scream at them. I wanted to grab Brandon by the shoulders and shake him until he showed some emotion, some shred of humanity. But I stayed silent. I was just a tired old man, a retired auditor who had spent his life crunching numbers and saving pennies while his son spent dollars. The priest finished his prayers. As the first shovel of dirt hit the casket lid with a hollow thud, Vanessa stepped closer to me. I thought she was going to offer a hug. I thought maybe finally she would show some compassion. I was wrong. She leaned in her perfume, overpowering the smell of wet earth and rain. "Dad," she whispered, her voice sharp and cold. "Where are the house keys?" I blinked, confused. I looked at her. "What?" "The keys to the house, Wallace," she said, dropping the pretense of politeness. "Brandon and I need to get in there today. We need to start the inventory." "Inventory," I stammered, my voice trembling. "Vanessa, what are you talking about? Beatrice is not even cold yet." We have to be practical, Dad. Brandon chimed in, stepping closer. He did not look me in the eye. He looked at my pockets. Mom is gone. You cannot live in that big house alone. It is too much for you. We have already made arrangements. Arrangements, I asked. A cold knot of dread formed in my stomach, tightening with every beat of my heart. Yes, arrangements, Vanessa said, pulling a glossy brochure from her purse and shoving it into my hand. Sunnyside Assisted Living Facility. It is very affordable. We packed your bag already. The van is waiting at the gate to take you there directly from here. You do not need to go back to the house. We will handle the sale. I looked at the brochure. It showed happy old people playing bingo, but I knew Sunnyside. It was a state-funded warehouse for the forgotten. It was a place people went to die when their families did not want to deal with them anymore. You are kicking me out, I whispered, the realization hitting me harder than the grief. You are taking my home. It is for your own good, Dad, Brandon said, his voice flat, robotic. You are getting old. You are forgetful. Last week you forgot where you put your glasses. You are clearly declining. We are just doing what is best. Lies. Pure, malicious lies. I was 71, but my mind was as sharp as a razor. I still did consulting work for small businesses. I did the Sunday crossword in pen. They were gaslighting me right there beside my wife's grave. I am not going anywhere, I said, my voice rising. That is my house. It is my... I paid for it. Actually, Vanessa sneered, her face twisting into a mask of cruelty. The deed was in Beatrice's name, too. And since she did not leave a will, the state laws say her portion goes to her next of kin. That is Brandon. We own half that house now, Wallace, and we are forcing a sale. You can go to Sunnyside or you can sleep on the street. But you are not stepping foot back in that house. Now give me the keys. She reached for my pocket. Her hand was like a claw. I slapped it away. The sound echoed in the silence of the cemetery. Brandon stepped forward, his fists clenched. Give her the keys, old man, he growled. Do not make this ugly. Make it ugly, I thought. You just tried to bury me along with your mother. I looked at my son. I looked at the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the boy I had paid tuition for, the boy I had bailed out of credit card debt 3 times. I saw nothing of myself in him. I saw a stranger, a predator. I am not giving you anything, I said, backing away until my heels hit the edge of the freshly dug earth. Brandon lunged. He was going to take them by force. My own son was going to mug me at his mother's funeral. Suddenly, a sleek black car pulled up onto the grass path, crunching the gravel. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom. The back window rolled down. A man in a chauffeur uniform stepped out holding a large black umbrella and walked briskly toward me, ignoring Brandon and Vanessa completely. Mr. King, the chauffeur, said, his voice deep and commanding. He extended a hand holding a phone. It is for you. It is urgent. Brandon froze. Vanessa looked at the car, her eyes widening at the display of wealth. Who is that? She whispered. I took the phone. Hello, I said, my voice shaking. Wallace, listen to me carefully. The voice on the other end was familiar, but I could not place it immediately. It was authoritative, powerful. Do not give them the keys. Do not get in their car. And for God's sake, do not go to Sunnyside. Who is this? I asked. It is Jonathan Pierce. Beatrice's boss. Listen, Wallace, you are in danger. Brandon is not just greedy. He is desperate. I have security footage you need to see. But right now you need to get away from them. Get in my car. Now. I lowered the phone. I looked at Brandon. He was staring at the Rolls-Royce with a mixture of greed and confusion. Who was that? Brandon demanded. A friend, I said. I turned and walked toward the car. Brandon grabbed my arm. You are not going anywhere until we get those keys. Get your hands off him. The chauffeur stepped between us. He was a mountain of a man, easily 6'5". He did not touch Brandon, he just stood there, an immovable object. "Mr. King is coming with us." Brandon let go. He was a bully, and like all bullies, he was a coward when faced with real strength. I climbed into the back seat of the Rolls-Royce. The leather was soft and warm. The door closed, shutting out the rain and the sight of my treacherous family. As the car pulled away, I looked back through the rain-streaked window. Brandon was kicking a tombstone in frustration. Vanessa was screaming at him. I sank back into the seat. I had escaped the immediate threat, but I had no idea what I was running toward. Jonathan Pierce was the CEO of Pierce Tech, a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate. Beatrice had been his secretary for 30 years. Why was he sending a Rolls-Royce for me? Why did he say I was in danger? The car glided through the city streets, moving away from the suburbs and toward the gleaming glass towers of the financial district. My mind was racing. I thought about the last few months. Beatrice had been acting strange. She was secretive. She took phone calls in the garage. She changed the password on her laptop. I thought maybe she was planning a surprise party for our 50th anniversary. I was a fool. The car stopped in front of the tallest building in the city, the Pierce Tower. The chauffeur opened my door. "Mr. Pierce is waiting on the top floor," he said. I walked into the lobby. It was a cathedral of glass and steel. Security guards nodded at me as if they knew who I was. I took the private elevator up. My ears popped as we ascended 50 stories in seconds. When the doors opened, I stepped into a penthouse office that was larger than my entire house. Jonathan Pierce was waiting. He looked exactly like he did on the news, silver hair, sharp blue eyes, a suit that cost more than my car. "Wallace," he said, walking over and shaking my hand firmly. "I am sorry about Beatrice. She was a remarkable woman." "Thank you, Mr. Pierce," I said. "But I am confused. You said on the phone that I was in danger. You said Beatrice wasn't who I thought she was." Jonathan nodded. "Please sit down." I sat in a leather chair facing his massive desk. He did not sit. He paced. "Wallace. What did Beatrice tell you her job title was?" "She was an executive assistant," I said. "She managed your schedule. She filed reports. She ordered lunch." Jonathan smiled sadly. "That is what we told the world. That is what we told the IRS. That is what we told Brandon. Because if anyone knew the truth, Beatrice would have been a target decades ago." "The truth?" I asked, leaning forward. "Beatrice was not my assistant, Wallace. She was my partner." I stared at him. My Beatrice. The woman who clipped coupons. The woman who worried about the electric bill. 30 years ago, Jonathan continued, when I started this company, I was brilliant at coding but terrible at strategy. Beatrice was the opposite. She saw patterns no one else saw. She predicted the market crashes of '99 and 2008. She saved this company 3 times. I could not give her the title of co-founder because the board was sexist and the investors were sharks. They would have eaten her alive. So we made a deal. She stayed in the shadows. She played the role of the humble secretary. But in exchange, she got equity. Equity, I repeated the word, feeling foreign on my tongue. "Phantom stock," Jonathan said. "Untraceable to the public, but fully vested and legal." Wallace Beatrice owned 15% of Pierce Tech. My head spun. I tried to do the math in my head. 15% of a company worth billions. That means, I whispered. "It means her estate is worth approximately $10 million, Jonathan said. "And as her husband, you are the sole beneficiary. $10 million. I sat there stunned. I was a millionaire. I had been a millionaire for years, and I did not know it. Why didn't she tell me? I asked, feeling a pang of hurt. Did she not trust me? "She trusted you with her life," Jonathan said. But she did not trust Brandon. She knew your son better than you did Wallace. She knew he had a weakness for easy money. She wanted him to learn to work to build his own life. She was terrified that if he knew about the money, he would stop trying. She was right, wasn't she? I thought about Brandon at the funeral. I thought about the Sunnyside brochure. I thought about the greed in his eyes. Yes, I said. She was right. But that is not why you are here, Jonathan said, his voice turning hard. The money is just the context. The danger is real. Brandon is in trouble, Wallace. Deep trouble. What kind of trouble, I asked. Jonathan picked up a remote and pointed it at a large screen on the wall. The screen flickered to life. It showed a grainy video. It looked like it was taken from a security camera in a parking garage. I saw Brandon. He was arguing with two men. They were large, wearing leather jackets. One of them grabbed Brandon by the throat and pinned him against a car. That footage is from 3 days ago, Jonathan said. Those men are enforcers for the Ivanov crime syndicate. They run the biggest illegal gambling ring in the state. Brandon owes them money, Wallace. A lot of money. How much? I asked, my mouth dry. $500,000, Jonathan said. He has been gambling on everything. Sports, stocks, crypto. He lost it all. And he borrowed from the worst people possible. I felt sick. My son was not just greedy. He was a degenerate gambler involved with the mob. But it gets worse, Jonathan said. Listen to the audio. He pressed a button. The video had sound. I heard Brandon's voice, high-pitched and terrified. Please, I need more time. My mother is sick. She is going to die any day now. She has a life insurance policy and a house. I will pay you back with the inheritance. I promise. Just give me a week. One of the men slapped Brandon. You have until the funeral, the man said. If we do not get our money by midnight on the day you put her in the ground, we take something else. My stomach turned. Brandon had been waiting for Beatrice to die. He had been banking on it. And now that she was gone, he was coming for me. That was why he wanted the house keys. That was why he wanted to sell everything immediately. He was not just impatient. He was running for his life. But the house is only worth $400,000, I said. Even if he sells it today, it won't cover the debt. Exactly, Jonathan said. And that is where the second problem comes in. Brandon knows he is short. He needs more leverage. And he has done something unforgivable. Jonathan walked to the conference room door, the one I had seen earlier. I told you Beatrice protected you, Jonathan said. But she could not protect you from everything. Brandon has been living a double life, Wallace. And this is the collateral damage. He opened the door. Sierra was standing there, the baby in her arms. She looked terrified. She was wearing cheap clothes, her hair was messy, and she looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. Who is she? I asked, standing up. This is Sierra, Jonathan said gently. She was Brandon's mistress for the last 2 years, and that baby in her arms is your grandson. I stared at the child. He was sleeping peacefully, unaware that his father was a monster. Brandon promised her the world, Jonathan explained. He told her he was going to leave Vanessa. He told her he was rich. He set her up in an apartment and then stopped paying the rent 3 months ago. When the loan sharks came for him, he offered them a deal. If he couldn't pay the money, he would give them the girl and the kid. My knees gave out. I fell back into the chair. My son. My own flesh and blood. He was willing to sell a woman and his own child to save his skin. They came for me last night, Sierra said, her voice trembling. They banged on my door. They said Brandon sold my debt to them. I ran. I didn't know where to go. I found Mr. Pierce's number in Brandon's phone bill. I called him. She saved your life, Wallace, Jonathan said. Because when she called me, she told me what Brandon was planning for you. For me, I whispered. He isn't just planning to put you in a nursing home, Jonathan said grimly. He made a deal with a corrupt doctor. He paid for a falsified medical report stating you have advanced dementia. Level 3. That declares you legally incompetent. With that paper, he doesn't need your permission to sell the house. He doesn't need your permission to empty your bank accounts. He becomes your legal guardian. And once he has that power, Jonathan trailed off, but I knew what he wasn't saying. Once he had power of attorney, I would disappear. Maybe a pill in my food. Maybe a pillow over my face. An old man with dementia dying in his sleep. It happens every day. I felt a cold rage spreading through my veins, replacing the shock. I had spent my life being a gentle man. I balanced books. I followed rules. I loved my family. And this was my reward. Betrayal. I looked at Sierra. I looked at the innocent baby. I looked at Jonathan, who had stepped out of the shadows to save me. What do? I asked. My voice did not shake this time. It was steady. It was the voice of a man who was done being a victim. Jonathan smiled a cold, predatory smile. We are going to give him exactly what he wants. Jonathan said, he wants an incompetent old man. He wants a helpless victim. We are going to give him the performance of a lifetime. And while he thinks he is winning, we are going to tighten the noose around his neck until he chokes. How? I asked. You are going back to that house, Jonathan said. You are going to let him think he has won. You are going to act confused. You are going to act frail. You are going to let Vanessa treat you like garbage. And while you are doing that, you are going to wear a wire. A wire? I asked. A high-tech recording device, Jonathan corrected. We need him to admit to the debt. We need him to admit to the fraud. And we need him to admit to the plan to sell the house illegally. Once we have that on tape, we destroy him. Not just legally, Wallace. We are going to destroy him publicly. We are going to make sure everyone he knows, every friend, every partner, every creditor knows exactly what he is. I stood up. I walked over to Sierra. I looked at the baby. Does he have a name? I asked. Leo, she whispered. Leo, I said. A lion. Good name. I turned to Jonathan. Give me the wire, I said. I am going home. I left the Pierce Tower an hour later. The rain had stopped, but the city looked different to me now. It was darker, sharper. I was no longer Wallace the retiree. I was Wallace the spy. I was Wallace the avenger. I took a taxi back to the suburbs. When I pulled up to my house, I saw a dumpster in the driveway. Vanessa was already throwing things out. My books. Beatrice gardening tools. The quilt she made by hand. They were tossing my life into the trash before my body was even cold. I got out of the taxi. I hunched my shoulders. I let my hands tremble. I put a vacant look in my eyes. Vanessa saw me. She marched down the driveway, her face furious. I thought you were going to Sunnyside, she snapped. How did you get here? I forgot. I stammered, making my voice sound weak and confused. I forgot where I was going. I just wanted to come home. Is B inside? Vanessa rolled her eyes. Oh God, he is losing it already. Brandon, come handle your father. Brandon came out of the house. He looked stressed. Dad, what are you doing here? The van is coming back for you. Please, son, I begged, grabbing his sleeve. Just let me sleep in the basement. Just for one night. I am so tired. I don't remember where my pills are. Brandon looked at Vanessa. She sighed. Fine. Put him in the storage room downstairs. But lock the door. We cannot have him wandering around while the appraiser is here tomorrow. They dragged me inside. The house smelled like bleach. They were scrubbing away our scent. They pushed me into the small, windowless room in the basement where we used to store Christmas decorations. It was cold. There was only a cot. Stay here, Brandon said. Do not make a sound. He slammed the door and locked it. I heard his footsteps retreating upstairs. I sat on the cot in the dark. I stopped trembling. I straightened my back. I reached into my shirt and adjusted the tiny microphone taped to my chest. "I am not locked in here with you, Brandon," I whispered to the darkness. "You are locked in here with me, and the hunt begins now." The taxi taillights faded into the mist, leaving me standing alone at the curb of the home I had purchased 30 years ago. The rain had turned into a freezing drizzle that coated the pavement in a slick, dangerous sheen. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my keyring, the brass metal warm from my body heat. I walked up the driveway, my steps heavy and deliberate. I needed to get inside. I needed to play the role of my life. But as I approached the front porch, my foot snagged on something wet and heavy lying in the grass. I stumbled, almost losing my balance. I looked down. In the dim light of the street lamp, I saw a pile of fabric soaked in mud and rain. I knelt down, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was blue silk. It was Beatrice's favorite dress, the one she wore to our 40th anniversary dinner. Next to it was her wool cardigan, the one she wrapped herself in when she drank her morning tea. They had not just thrown her things away. They had desecrated them. They had tossed my wife's life onto the lawn like garbage to be ruined by the elements. I felt a scream rising in my throat, a primal roar of grief and rage that wanted to tear this house apart brick by brick. But I swallowed it. I forced it down into the pit of my stomach, where it would fuel the fire I needed for what was coming. I stood up, my hands trembling not from the cold, but from the sheer effort of restraint. I walked to the front door. I slid my key into the lock. It did not turn. I jiggled it. I pushed it. Nothing. The metal cylinder was stiff and foreign. They had changed the locks. My wife had been dead for 3 days, and they had already erased me from my own home. I pounded on the door. I made my fist weak, my knocks rhythmic and frantic like a frightened child. "Open up," I cried out, letting my voice crack. Beatrice let me in. "It is cold." The door swung open. Vanessa stood there, filling the frame. She was wearing one of Beatrice's aprons over her designer clothes, an insult that almost made me break character. She looked at me with a mixture of shock and disgust. "Wallace," she hissed. "What are you doing here? You were supposed to be on the van to Sunnyside. Did you run away?" I blinked rapidly, letting my eyes lose focus. I looked past her into the hallway. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Where is Beatrice?" She said she was making pot roast. I smell it. Vanessa rolled her eyes and turned her head, shouting into the house. "Brandon, get down here! Your father is back, and he is hallucinating." Brandon appeared at the top of the stairs. He was holding a glass of my expensive scotch. He looked annoyed, not worried. I told the driver to wait for him, he said, coming down the stairs. "How did he get back here?" "I do not know," Vanessa snapped. "But he is here now, and he thinks I am the maid or something. He is asking for your mother." I stepped into the foyer, shaking the rain off my coat like a wet dog. "It is so cold in here," I mumbled, hugging myself. "Why is it so cold? Did we pay the gas bill?" Beatrice always worries about the gas bill. Brandon walked up to me and grabbed my arm, his grip bruising. "Dad, stop it. Mom is dead. You know that. We just came from the funeral." "Funeral?" I asked, looking at him with blank confusion. "Who died? Is it Uncle Jerry?" I told him to stop smoking. Brandon looked at Vanessa. "He is gone," he whispered. "The dementia is peaking. It must be the stress." "Good," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with ice. "That makes things easier. If he does not know who died, he won't know what he is signing tomorrow." "Signing?" I asked, looking between them. "Are we signing birthday cards?" "Beatrice loves cards." "Shut up, old man," Vanessa snapped. She looked at Brandon. We cannot send him to Sunnyside tonight. The intake office closes at 5 and they charge a penalty for after-hours drop-offs. Plus, if he is this confused, they might refuse him until he is sedated. We need him lucid enough to hold a pen tomorrow when the lawyer comes with the power of attorney papers. Brandon sighed, looking at his watch. So what do? We can't have him wandering around the house. We have the real estate agent coming at 8 in the morning to take photos for the listing. He will scare off buyers if he is drooling on the sofa. I stood there, letting my jaw hang slack, listening to them discuss my fate as if I were a piece of broken furniture. They wanted to sell the house immediately. They needed the money to pay off the Ivanov syndicate. Every second counted for them. Put him in the basement, Vanessa said. The basement, Brandon asked. It is freezing down there. He won't know the difference, she replied. There is that cot in the storage room. It has a lock on the outside. We can keep him there tonight, give him his pills, and bring him up tomorrow for the signing. Once he signs the house over to us and grants you power of attorney, we can dump him at the state facility and never look back. Brandon looked at me. I stared back, giving him the most vacant, pathetic look I could muster. I wanted him to see a harmless, confused old man. I wanted him to underestimate me. Fine, he said, but you are cleaning him up if he messes himself. They grabbed me by the arms. They did not guide me. They dragged me. They pulled me toward the narrow door under the staircase that led to the darkness below. Beatrice, I called out feebly. Are you downstairs? Is supper ready? Shut up, Dad. Brandon grunted, opening the door. A blast of stale, cold air hit my face. The basement was unfinished concrete and darkness. It was where we kept the holiday decorations, the old tax files, and the memories we did not look at every day. Now it was my cell. They pushed me down the stairs. I stumbled, gripping the railing to keep from falling. I heard the door slam shut above me. Then the distinct click of the deadbolt sliding into place. I stood in the darkness at the bottom of the stairs. The only light came from the small crack under the door above. I listened to their footsteps retreating to the kitchen. I heard the clinking of glasses. They were toasting. They were celebrating their victory. I let out a long, slow breath. I straightened my back. The trembling in my hands stopped. The confusion in my eyes vanished, replaced by a cold, hard focus. I walked over to the storage room. I knew this basement better than they did. I knew where the emergency flashlight was hidden behind the water heater. I retrieved it and clicked it on. The beam cut through the gloom, illuminating the stacks of boxes. I found the cot. It was a dusty military-style folding bed we had bought for camping trips that never happened. I sat down on it. It smelled of mildew. I reached into my shirt and pulled out the small digital recorder Jonathan had taped to my chest. The red light was blinking, steady and silent. It had captured everything. The cruelty. The plan to sell the house. The admission of coercion. I am not senile, Brandon, I whispered to the empty room, my voice steady and strong. And I am not helpless. I looked around the room. My eyes landed on a stack of plastic bins labeled Tax Returns, 1990-2000. Brandon thought this was just a storage room. He did not know that behind those bins in a false panel of the drywall was my personal safe. The one containing the original deed to the house, the one that proved Beatrice and I owned it outright with no mortgage. And more importantly, it contained the leverage I would need for the next phase. I stood up and walked to the wall. I moved the bins silently. I ran my fingers along the drywall until I found the seam. I pried it open. The small safe was there untouched. I spun the dial. Left, right, left. Click. I opened it. Inside were the documents. And a gun. A vintage Colt 1911 that my father had carried. I stared at the weapon. No, I thought. That is too easy. Death is too quick for them. They need to lose everything first. I took the documents and closed the safe. I hid the papers inside the lining of my coat. I lay back down on the cot and turned off the flashlight. Above me, I heard the floorboards creak. They were walking around my house, sitting in my chairs, drinking my wine. Let them enjoy it, I thought. Let them get comfortable. Let them think the old man is rotting in the dark. Because tomorrow, when that lawyer arrives, they are not going to get a signature. They are going to get a show. And I was going to be the director, the lead actor, and the executioner. I closed my eyes, but I did not sleep. I listened, I waited, and I planned. The basement was cold, but my rage kept me warm. The darkness of the basement was absolute, a suffocating black void that smelled of damp concrete and forgotten years. I sat on the edge of the cot, my back stiff, my eyes wide open, staring into the gloom. Sleep was impossible. My body was exhausted, aching from the charade of frailty I had performed on the front lawn, but my mind was razor-sharp, humming with the adrenaline of the hunt. I reached into the pocket of my trousers and pulled out the device Jonathan Pierce had pressed into my hand before I left his office. It was a high-tech listening disc, no larger than a hockey puck. He told me it could amplify sound through 12 inches of concrete. I stood up, my joints popping in the silence, and dragged the cot over to the center of the room directly beneath the living room floorboards. I climbed onto the cot, balancing precariously, and pressed the disc against the unfinished wood of the ceiling. I adjusted the earbud in my left ear. At first there was only the static hiss of the house settling, the groan of pipes, the hum of the refrigerator. Then I heard them. The footsteps were heavy and pacing. The sound of angry whispers filtered down, distorted at first, then sharpening into clarity as I fine-tuned the dial. "You are an idiot, Brandon." Vanessa's voice was a venomous hiss slicing through the floorboards. "You told me the house was worth $500,000. I checked Zillow. The market has cooled. The estimate is $420 at best." I heard the clinking of glass. Brandon was drinking again. "It does not matter." Brandon snapped, his voice slurring slightly. "Once the old man signs the power of attorney tomorrow, we liquidate everything. The house, the car, the savings. It will be enough to cover the debt." "It better be," Vanessa retorted, "because I am not losing my lifestyle because you are a degenerate gambler. I have needs, Brandon. I have standards." I pressed the device harder against the wood, my hand trembling with rage. They were discussing the liquidation of my life like they were selling off scrap metal. And speaking of needs, Vanessa continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that the microphone picked up perfectly. "You need to cover the credit card bill that is coming next week." "What bill?" Brandon asked. "The Amex," Vanessa said. "Your mother's Amex." I froze. Beatrice's American Express, the one she kept for emergencies, the one she hadn't used in 5 years. "You used Mom's card." Brandon sounded shocked, but not angry, just surprised. "When?" "2 days before she died," Vanessa said, her tone casual, as if discussing the weather. "While she was in the ICU, I went into her purse. I knew she wouldn't notice. I needed that Hermes Birkin bag, Brandon. The limited edition one. It was $20,000, and there was only one left in the boutique. I couldn't wait for the inheritance. I felt a wave of nausea roll over me, so powerful I almost fell off the cot. My wife was dying, hooked up to machines, fighting for her last breaths. And this woman, this vulture, was rifling through her purse to buy a handbag. $20,000. Beatrice had never spent $20,000 on herself in her entire life. She bought her coats at outlet stores. She clipped coupons for groceries. And Vanessa had stolen that dignity in a single swipe. "You are crazy," Brandon hissed, but I could hear the fear in his voice. "If the estate lawyer sees that charge before we get control of the accounts, we are screwed. That is fraud, Vanessa. That is grand larceny." "Nobody is going to see it," Vanessa said, dismissing him. "Once Wallace signs the papers tomorrow, we control the estate. We pay off the card with the estate funds and nobody asks questions. The old man is senile. He doesn't even know what day it is. He won't notice a $20,000 charge. I gritted my teeth so hard I felt a molar crack. Oh, I noticed, Vanessa. And the whole world is going to notice. There was a silence upstairs, then the sound of a heavy object slamming onto a table. It is not just the bag, Brandon said, his voice shaking. I got a text from the Ivanovs. The mob. I held my breath, pressing the earbud deeper. They moved up the timeline, Brandon whispered. We don't have a week. We have 3 days. They said if they don't have the first 200,000 by Friday, they are going to start breaking things. And they aren't talking about furniture. 3 days, Vanessa sounded shrill. But the house sale will take weeks to close even if we sell to a cash buyer. That is why we need his savings, Brandon said. I know he has a retirement account. I found the statements in his desk last month. There is about 80,000 in there. We drain that first to buy time. Then we dump the house for whatever we can get. And what about Wallace? Vanessa asked. What do we do with him once the money is gone? Brandon laughed, a dry, hollow sound that made my blood run cold. We dump him at Sunnyside like we planned. Or we leave him in the basement. Who cares? Once the money is transferred, he is just a mouth to feed. If he gets sick, well, old people get sick. It happens. He was talking about letting me die. My son. The boy I taught to fish. The boy I held when he scraped his knee. He was plotting my passive execution to cover his gambling debts. The recording light on the device was blinking steady and red. I had it. I had the confession of theft. I had the admission of debt to organized crime. I had the conspiracy to defraud. I lowered the device, my hand shaking. I needed to sit down. I needed to process the sheer magnitude of the evil living above my head. But as I stepped down from the cot, my foot landed on a loose stack of old magazines I hadn't seen in the dark. The stack slid. I lost my balance. I flailed, grabbing for the metal shelving unit to steady myself. The shelf was unstable. It tipped. A metal paint can sitting on the edge slid off and crashed onto the concrete floor. Clang. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent basement. It echoed off the walls, sharp and undeniable. Upstairs, the conversation stopped instantly. What was that? Vanessa whispered. It came from the basement, Brandon said. I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I had been careless. I had let my emotions make me sloppy. He is listening, Vanessa hissed. I told you he wasn't as out of it as he looked. Go check. I heard heavy footsteps stomping toward the basement door. I had seconds, maybe 5, maybe 10. I couldn't be found standing there with a high-tech listening device in my hand. They would know. They would kill me right then and there. I shoved the device and the earbud deep into the pocket of my coat. I kicked the paint can aside. I looked around frantically. I couldn't hide. The room was too small. The lock on the door above clicked. The door creaked open. Who is down there? Brandon shouted, his voice echoing down the stairs. I did the only thing I could do. I dropped to my knees. I grabbed a handful of old receipts from an open box on the floor and scattered them around me. I hunched my shoulders. I let my jaw go slack. I started rocking back and forth, humming a tuneless melody. Heavy boots thudded down the wooden stairs. The beam of a flashlight cut through the darkness, blinding me. Dad, Brandon barked. What the hell are you doing? I didn't look at him. I kept rocking. I picked up a receipt from 1998. The numbers, I mumbled, my voice raspy and distant. The numbers don't add up, Beatrice. We need to carry the one. Where is the red pen? I cannot find the red pen. Brandon stopped at the bottom of the stairs. He shined the light directly into my face. I didn't blink. I stared past the light into the empty corner of the room. It is tax season, I whispered, urgency creeping into my tone. The audit is coming. We have to hide the deductions. Vanessa appeared on the stairs behind Brandon. "What is he doing?" she asked. "He is losing his mind," Brandon said, lowering the flashlight slightly. "He knocked over some paint. He thinks he is doing taxes." I looked up at Brandon, my eyes wide and vacant. "Who are you?" I asked. "Are you the auditor?" "I have the receipts." "Look." I held up a faded piece of paper. "It is all here." Brandon let out a sigh of disgust. "He is totally gone." The stress must have snapped whatever was left of his brain. "Good," Vanessa said from the stairs. "That makes tomorrow easier. Get him back on the cot. And tie the door shut if you have to. We cannot have him making noise while I am trying to sleep." Brandon walked over to me. He grabbed me by the shoulder and hauled me up. I went limp, letting him drag me like a rag doll. "Go to sleep, old man," he grunted, pushing me toward the cot. "Stop playing with the trash." I stumbled and fell onto the mattress. I curled into a ball, pulling my coat tight around me. I started muttering again. "The red pen, Beatrice. Find the red pen." Brandon shook his head. He turned and walked back to the stairs. He climbed up and I heard the heavy thud of the door closing. The lock clicked. Then, for good measure, I heard him wedge a chair under the doorknob from the outside. I lay there in the dark, listening to his footsteps fade. I waited 5 minutes, then 10. Slowly, I stopped rocking. The vacancy left my eyes. I sat up. I reached into my pocket and touched the cold metal of the recording device. They thought I was broken. They thought I was a confused old man lost in the past. They were wrong. I was not lost in the past. I was documenting their future. And it was going to be a future behind bars. I lay back down, staring at the ceiling. I did not sleep. I watched the shadows and waited for the sun to rise. The rats upstairs were asleep, but the exterminator was wide awake. The silence of the house was heavier than the noise. I lay on the cot, listening. The heavy thud of the front door closing had echoed 10 minutes ago, followed by the roar of Brandon's car engine and the lighter hum of Vanessa's SUV. They were gone. They had left the senile old man alone in the dark, probably assuming I was too confused to find the bathroom, let alone a way out. I stood up and walked to the basement door. My heart was beating a slow, steady rhythm against my ribs. I was not afraid. Fear had evaporated the moment I heard them planning to let me die. Now there was only cold calculation. I tried the knob. It turned. They had removed the chair from under the handle, probably when they came down to toss a granola bar at me earlier this morning. They had locked the deadbolt, but they were sloppy. They were arrogant. They forgot that I built this house. I knew every screw, every hinge, every weakness. I reached up to the top of the door frame. My fingers brushed against the rough, unfinished wood until they found the small groove I had chiseled there 20 years ago. It was a hiding spot for a spare key meant for emergencies like locking ourselves out during a tornado warning. I pulled the key down. The brass was cold and dusty. I slid it into the lock. It turned with a smooth, satisfying click. I stepped out into the hallway. The house was bright, filled with morning sunlight that felt alien after the gloom of the basement. It was a mess. Pizza boxes were stacked on the antique side table. Muddy footprints tracked across the Persian rug Beatrice had loved. They were living like squatters in a mansion they had not yet stolen. I moved quickly. I did not have much time. Brandon was meeting the crooked lawyer at noon, but he might come back for files. I headed straight for the study. This room had been my sanctuary. It was where I balanced the family budget, where I read my history books. Now it smelled of vape smoke and stale beer. Brandon had claimed it as his command center. He had swept my photos off the desk and replaced them with stacks of gambling slips and unpaid bills. I sat in my old leather chair. It groaned familiarly. I opened the top drawer. Locked. I grabbed the letter opener from the desk, a heavy brass piece shaped like a dagger. I jammed it into the gap and pried. The cheap lock snapped. Brandon never invested in quality. Inside the drawer was a chaotic mess of papers. Final notices from credit card companies, a pawn shop receipt for my golf clubs, and at the bottom a thick black folder labeled medical. I pulled it out. My hands were steady. I opened it. The first page was a cognitive assessment report. The patient name was Wallace King. The date was yesterday. I read the diagnosis. Advanced vascular dementia, stage 3. Patient exhibits severe disorientation, inability to recognize family members, aggressive outbursts, and total lack of financial competency. Patient requires immediate custodial care and transfer of all legal authority to next of kin. I stared at the words. I had never taken this test. I had never been to this clinic. I looked at the signature at the bottom. Dr. Aris Zorik. The stamp was official, but I knew the name. Jonathan Pierce had warned me about him. Zorik was a doctor who had lost his license in 2 other states for insurance fraud. He was a gun for hire with a stethoscope. I flipped the page. Stapled to the back of the report was a handwritten invoice. $5,000, paid in cash. There it was. The price of my life. The price of my freedom. $5,000. My son had bought a piece of paper that turned me from a person into a piece of property. With this document, he could legally sign the house over to himself. He could drain the accounts. He could toss me into a state facility, and no judge would question him because the medical record said I was too gone to know the difference. I felt a surge of bile in my throat. This was not just theft. This was identity murder. He was erasing Wallace King, the man, and replacing him with Wallace King, the invalid. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the smartphone Jonathan had given me. It was a sleek black device, encrypted and untraceable. I opened the camera app. I photographed every page. The diagnosis, the signature, the invoice. I made sure the lighting was perfect. I needed every pixel to be sharp. Then I saw something else tucked into the back pocket of the folder. It was a brochure for the Sunnyside facility, but clipped to it was a printout of an email exchange between Brandon and the facility director. Subject: urgent admission. Body: we need the cheapest bed available. He does not need a private room. Just keep him sedated. We will stop payment if he causes trouble. Sedated. They were not just going to lock me away. They were going to drug me into oblivion to make sure I never woke up enough to tell anyone the truth. I photographed that too. My finger hovered over the send button. I attached the images to a secure message addressed to Attorney Fletcher Jonathan's shark of a lawyer. I typed a single line. I have the smoking gun. I hit send. The progress bar swooshed across the screen. Sent. The phone buzzed in my hand almost instantly. It was Fletcher. Message received. This is a nuclear bomb, Wallace. This document proves conspiracy to commit fraud and medical malpractice. We can bury them with this. Do you want me to call the police now? I looked at the empty house. I looked at the mud on the rug. I thought about Sierra and little Leo hiding in a safe house paid for by Jonathan. I thought about Beatrice's clothes rotting on the front lawn. No, I typed back. Not yet. If we arrest them now, they will plea bargain. They will blame the doctor. They will say they were desperate. They might get a few years. That is not enough. I need them to use it, I typed. I need to catch them in the act of using this fake document to steal the house. I want them to think they have won. I want them to sign the papers. I want them to stand up in front of their friends and brag about it. Fletcher replied a moment later. You are playing a dangerous game, Wallace. If they get power of attorney, even for an hour, they can do a lot of damage. Let them try, I typed. I am ready. I closed the folder and put it back in the drawer. I tried to fix the broken lock, but it was useless. I arranged the papers to look messy, as if Brandon had just shoved them in there himself. He was careless. He would not notice. I stood up. I needed to get back to the basement. I needed to be the rat in the walls again. But as I walked toward the door, my eye caught something on the bookshelf. It was a photo album. One of the old ones with the sticky pages. It was lying open as if someone had been looking through it and then tossed it aside. I walked over. It was open to a picture from 20 years ago. It was Brandon's high school graduation. He was smiling, his arm around my shoulder. I looked so proud in that picture. My chest was puffed out. I remembered that day. I remembered buying him that car for graduation. I remembered telling him he could be anything he wanted. And right next to the photo, Vanessa probably had used a black Sharpie to draw a mustache and devil horns on my face. They had scribbled ATM across my forehead. It was petty. It was childish. And it hurt more than the fake medical report. It showed the absolute contempt they held for me. I was not a father to them. I was a joke. A resource to be mined and then mocked. I closed the album. I felt the last drop of hesitation evaporate from my soul. The father in me died in that study. The auditor took over. I checked the time. They would be back soon for lunch. They would expect to find me locked in the dark. I went back to the basement door. I stepped inside. I pulled the door shut until the latch clicked. I went down the stairs into the cold. I sat on the cot. I put the flashlight away. I waited. An hour later, I heard the front door open. "Honey, we are back," Vanessa shouted. "Did you get the papers from the doctor?" "Yeah," Brandon's voice replied, coming from the kitchen. "Cost me another $500 to expedite the stamp, but we have it. He is officially a vegetable as far as the state of New York is concerned." "Excellent," Vanessa said. "Get him upstairs. The notary is coming at 6. We need to make sure he looks presentable but not too coherent. Give him 2 of the blue pills." The blue pills. Sleeping aids. They were going to drug me. Footsteps approached the basement door. The chair scraped against the floor as they removed the wedge. Dad Brandon called out, his voice fake and cheerful. "Time to wake up. We have a big dinner tonight. We are celebrating." I lay back on the cot. I let my mouth hang open. I made my hands shake. "Celebrating," I mumbled as the light hit my face. "Is it my birthday? Did you bring cake?" Brandon looked down at me. He smiled a shark-like grin. "Yeah, Dad," he said. "It is a very special day. We are going to fix everything." He held out a hand. In his palm were 2 small blue pills. "Take these," he said. "They will help you with the excitement." I took the pills. My hand trembled. I put them in my mouth. I reached for the water bottle he offered. I took a sip. I swallowed. "Good boy," Brandon said. He turned to walk back up the stairs. He did not see me spit the pills into my sleeve. He did not see the look in my eyes. Tonight they were celebrating their victory. Tonight they were going to parade their senile father in front of a notary and sign away his life. But tonight the ghost of Beatrice was coming to dinner, and she was bringing the bill. The smell of roasted chicken filled the house, but it did not smell like a family dinner to me. It smelled like a trap. I sat at the head of the dining table, the spot where I had carved the turkey every Thanksgiving for 30 years. Now I was a prisoner in my own chair, my hands resting on the white tablecloth, trembling not from age but from a carefully calculated performance. Across from me, Brandon sat with a bottle of wine already half empty. He was sweating. I could see the beads of perspiration on his forehead gleaming under the chandelier light. He was nervous. The clock was ticking on his debt to the Ivanov syndicate, and he needed my signature tonight, or he was a dead man walking. To his right, Vanessa was cutting her meat with aggressive precision, her knife screeching against my fine china. Next to me sat a man I did not know. He was introduced as Mr. Henderson, a notary public, but he looked more like a used car salesman who had fallen on hard times. He had a leather portfolio open in front of him, and inside it lay the document that would end my life as a free man. The durable power of attorney. "Eat up, Dad," Brandon said, his voice tight and forced. "We have business to attend to." I stared at the bowl of tomato bisque in front of me. It was rich and red like blood. I picked up my spoon, my hand shaking so violently that the soup sloshed against the rim. I brought it to my lips, spilling drops onto my chin. I let them see the mess. I let them see a broken man who could barely feed himself. "I miss your mother," I whimpered, letting a tear slide down my cheek. "She always made the soup. She put basil in it. This tastes like tin." Vanessa slammed her fork down. "It is gourmet soup, Wallace. Just eat it and stop complaining. We are trying to help you. Help me. They were trying to bury me." Mr. Henderson cleared his throat, looking at his watch. "Mr. King, if we could proceed. I have another appointment at 8. "Right," Brandon said. He stood up and walked over to the notary, taking the thick document from the folder. He placed it in front of me. It was heavy. The paper was thick and expensive. "This is it, Dad," Brandon said, putting a heavy fountain pen in my hand. "This is the paper we talked about. It just says that Vanessa and I can help you pay your bills. It says we can make sure the house is taken care of so you do not have to worry. You just sign right there at the bottom." I looked at the document. The legal jargon was dense, but I knew what it said. It granted Brandon King full authority over all assets, real estate, and medical decisions for Wallace King, effective immediately. It was a death warrant. I gripped the pen. I let my hand hover over the signature line. I made the pen tip dance nervously over the paper, leaving tiny dots of ink. "I do not know." I mumbled, my voice quivering. "I should read it. Beatrice always said to read before signing." "You do not need to read it, Dad," Brandon said, his voice rising in panic. "I read it. It is standard. Just sign the damn paper." I looked up at him. I saw the desperation in his eyes. He was terrified. He was thinking about the mob enforcers who were probably counting down the hours. "I cannot do it," I cried, dropping the pen. "My hand. It shakes too much. I am scared, Brandon. I am so scared." "Sign it," Vanessa hissed, leaning across the table. "Pick up the pen and sign your name, Wallace. Do it now." I reached for the pen again, but as I did, my arm lashed out in a spasm. It was a movement I had practiced in the basement for hours. My hand struck the bowl of tomato bisque. The bowl flipped. Thick red soup flooded across the table. It drenched the tablecloth. It splashed onto Mr. Henderson's suit. And most importantly, it soaked the power of attorney document, completely turning the white paper into a sodden red pulp. "Oh my God!" Vanessa shrieked, jumping back as the soup dripped onto the floor. "You clumsy old fool! Look what you did!" Mr. Henderson stood up, brushing soup off his lap, his face purple with rage. "That was the original," he shouted. "That was the only certified copy I brought." "My printer is broken," Brandon yelled, grabbing the soggy paper. The ink was running, the text illegible. "It is ruined. We have to print another one." "I do not have time to wait for you to find a Kinko's," Mr. Henderson snapped, packing his bag. "I am leaving. Call my office on Monday." "Monday," Brandon shouted, grabbing the notary arm. "No, it has to be tonight. I will pay you double. Triple." "I cannot do tonight," the notary said, pulling his arm free. "I am booked. Find someone else." He stormed out of the house, slamming the front door. The silence that followed was heavy with violence. Brandon turned to me. His face was twisted into a mask of pure hatred. He looked at the soup dripping from the table. He looked at me, huddled in my chair. "You did that on purpose," he whispered. I shrank back, making myself small. No, son, I wailed, putting my hands over my face. It was an accident. My hand slipped. I am sorry. I am so useless. I just wanted to help. You are useless, Vanessa screamed. You are a waste of space. We should have left you in the basement. Brandon grabbed a napkin and threw it at me. It hit me in the face. We are screwed, he said to Vanessa. The Ivanovs want the proof of assets by Sunday morning. If I do not have the power of attorney to show them the house is mine, they are going to come for me. We can get another notary tomorrow, Vanessa said, pacing the room. No, Brandon said, pacing. It is Saturday. Most of them are closed or booked. And we need a witness. A credible witness. I lowered my hands from my face. I sniffled loud and pathetic. I can fix it, I whispered. They both stopped and looked at me. What did you say? Brandon snapped. I can fix it, I said, my voice gaining a little strength but still trembling with fake emotion. I ruined the dinner. I ruined the paper. I want to make it right, son. I want to sign. I want you to have the house. I do not want to be a burden anymore. Then sign a napkin, Brandon yelled. No, I said, shaking my head. It has to be proper. For Beatrice, listen to me. Tomorrow is Saturday. It would have been our anniversary. So what? Vanessa spat. Let us have a party, I said. A memorial party. For Beatrice. Invite everyone. Invite your business partners. Invite the neighbors. Invite your friends. Are you insane? Brandon asked. We are not throwing a party. Please, I begged, grabbing his hand. Just listen. I want to sign the papers in front of everyone. I want to make a speech. I want to tell everyone what a good son you are. I want to tell them that I am giving you the house because you take such good care of me. If we do it in front of everyone, nobody can ever say you forced me. It will be a tribute to your mother. I saw the gears turning in Brandon's head. He was a narcissist. He loved attention. The idea of a room full of people applauding him, appealing to his vanity. But more than that, he saw the practical angle. If I signed the papers in front of 50 witnesses, no judge could ever overturn it. It would be ironclad. And if he invited his creditors, or at least the people he owed money to socially, they would see that he was about to come into a massive fortune. It would buy him time. And you will sign, Vanessa asked, her eyes narrowing. You will sign everything. The house, the accounts, the medical proxy, everything I promised, tears streaming down my face again. I just want to be with Beatrice. I just want to rest. Let me give you this gift in front of the world. Let me be proud of you one last time. Brandon looked at Vanessa. It buys us credibility, he muttered to her. If he signs in public, the bank cannot question the transfer on Monday. And I can invite the loan shark liaison. If he sees the old man signing over $1 million asset, he will back off. Vanessa bit her lip, thinking. It is risky. It is our best shot, Brandon said. He looked back at me. Fine, Dad. We will have your party. Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. But you better be ready. You better give the performance of a lifetime. You are going to tell everyone how much you love us. You are going to tell them this is your idea. It is my idea, I said. I promise. Brandon grabbed the bottle of wine. Go clean yourself up, he said. You smell like soup. And go back to the basement. I do not want to see you until the party. I stood up shakily. I used the napkin to wipe the red stain from my chin. Thank you, son, I said. You are a good boy. Beatrice would be so proud. I shuffled out of the room. I walked slowly to the basement door. I heard them behind me already on their phones, calling caterers, calling friends, inviting the wolves to the feast. I closed the basement door behind me. I locked it from the inside this time just to be safe. I walked down the stairs into the dark. I sat on the cot and let out a long breath. The trembling stopped. The tears dried instantly. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the phone. I typed a message to Jonathan Pierce. The trap is set. The party is tomorrow at 7. Bring Sierra. Bring the lawyers, and bring the police. I lay back on the cot and stared at the ceiling. You wanted a show, Brandon, I thought. You wanted a public signing. You are going to get one. But you are not going to like the ending. Tomorrow night, the world would see exactly what kind of son you are. And Beatrice, my love, tomorrow night, we take back our name. Sunday morning arrived with the chaotic noise of a construction site. The house was buzzing with activity. Caterers were clattering trays in the kitchen. Florists were hauling in massive arrangements of white lilies that smelled like a funeral parlor, and a team of cleaners was scrubbing away the evidence of our squalor. Brandon and Vanessa were barking orders, trying to transform our home into a palace worthy of the high society guests they had invited to witness my demise. They were so distracted by their own vanity that they did not notice the basement door creak open. They did not see the old man in the tattered cardigan slip out through the mudroom and into the overgrown backyard. I moved through the hedges like a ghost, my breath misting in the cold morning air. I walked 2 blocks to the gas station on the corner where a black sedan was waiting. Jonathan Pierce had arranged everything. The driver nodded at me as I slid into the back seat. We drove in silence to Centennial Park. It was deserted at this hour, the grass frosted silver, the benches empty. Except for one. Sierra was sitting near the duck pond, wrapped in a heavy coat, Leo strapped to her chest in a carrier. She looked small and fragile, her eyes darting around nervously, as if she expected the Ivanov enforcers to jump out from behind the oak trees. When she saw me, she stiffened instinctively, clutching the baby closer. "Mr. King," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Is it safe?" "It is safe," I said, sitting down next to her. The bench was cold, but my blood was running hot. "Jonathan has men watching the perimeter. No one will touch you." She relaxed slightly, but her face was still drawn tight with anxiety. "Why did you want to meet?" she asked. "Mr. Pierce said you had a plan. He said you could get us out of here." "I do," I said, reaching into my coat pocket. "But first you need to understand who you are dealing with. You think Brandon loves you. You think he is just in a bad spot, and once he gets the money, he will come for you." She looked down at her hands. "He promised," she said softly. "He said Vanessa is cold. He said he only stays with her for the business connections. He said once he gets his inheritance, we are going to Italy." I pulled a folded piece of paper from my pocket. It was a printout of a text thread Jonathan's security team had intercepted from Brandon's phone. It was a conversation between Brandon and his lawyer from 2 days ago. "Read this," I said, handing it to her. Sierra took the paper. Her eyes scanned the lines. I watched her face transform. I saw the hope die. I saw the color drain from her cheeks, leaving her ashen. The text read, "Lawyer, what about the girl and the kid? If she shows up after the probate clears, she could contest the estate on behalf of the child. Paternity suits are messy. Brandon, don't worry about the whore. Once I pay off the Russians, I am cutting her loose. I promised her Italy, but she's getting a bus ticket to nowhere. If she tries to sue, I will call CPS and tell them she's a junkie. I am not letting a bastard child ruin my fresh start." Sierra made a sound like a wounded animal, a low, guttural sob that got stuck in her throat. She read it again, her hands shaking so hard the paper rattled. "He called me a whore," she whispered, tears spilling over her lashes. "He called Leo a bastard. He said he would call CPS. He was never going to take you to Italy." "Sierra," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "He was using you, just like he used me, just like he used his mother. To him, we are not people. We are leverage." She looked up at me. The fear in her eyes was gone, replaced by something much more useful. Hate. Pure, unadulterated fury. "I want to kill him," she hissed. "Don't kill him," I said. "That is too quick. Destroy him." I reached into my other pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. I placed it in her hands. Inside this envelope is a cashier check for $20,000, I said. It is my own money. It is enough to start over. Enough to get an apartment, get a car, get safe. And behind the check is a first-class ticket to Seattle leaving tomorrow morning. You have a cousin there, right? Jonathan told me. She nodded dumbly, staring at the check. But there is a condition, I said. What condition? She asked, looking up. You have to earn it, I said. You have to be at my house tonight. 7 o'clock. The doors will be open. There will be a lot of people. Important people. People Brandon needs to impress. I want you to walk in there. I continued, my voice hardening. I want you to walk right up to him while he is standing next to his wife. And I want you to introduce him to his son. Sierra looked at the check, then at the baby sleeping against her chest, then back at me. Her jaw set. Her eyes narrowed into slits. I will be there, she said, and I will wear my best dress. I stood up. Good. Because tonight we are not just taking his money, we are taking his name. I left her on the bench, clutching the envelope like a weapon. I walked back to the car, feeling lighter. The queen was on the board. Now it was time to move the rook. The car dropped me off a block from the house. I slipped back in through the garden unnoticed. The house was even more chaotic than before. Vanessa was screaming at a caterer about the color of the napkins. Brandon was on the phone, pacing the hallway, trying to sound confident while sweat stained the collar of his shirt. I went down to the basement and retrieved the second part of my plan. During my snooping in the study, I had found more than just medical records. I had found a hidden folder on Brandon's laptop. It was labeled receipts, but it wasn't for business expenses. It was a digital trail of his infidelity. Hotel invoices. 5-star resorts in the city. Weekends away when he told Vanessa he was at a conference. Receipts for jewelry that Vanessa never received. Dinners for 2 at restaurants Vanessa had never been to. I had printed them all out at Jonathan's office. Now I held them in my hand, a stack of glossy paper grenades. I waited until Vanessa went upstairs to shower and change for the party. I crept up the stairs, my steps silent on the plush carpet. I slipped into their master bedroom. The room smelled of expensive perfume and lies. I walked over to her vanity. Her makeup was spread out, ready for the evening. I placed the stack of receipts right in the center of the table next to her diamond earrings. I arranged them carefully so the dates and amounts were visible. I placed a note on top, written in block letters. From a friend who thought you should know where the mortgage money went. I slipped out of the room and hurried back down to the basement, locking the door behind me just as I heard the shower turn off upstairs. I sat on my cot and waited. 10 minutes passed. 15. Then I heard it. A scream. Not of fear, but of rage. It was a high, piercing shriek that vibrated through the floorboards. Brandon. I heard heavy footsteps running up the stairs. I heard a door slam. Then the muffled sounds of shouting. I pressed my ear to the ceiling. You lying son of a bitch, Vanessa was screaming. The Four Seasons. You told me you were in Chicago for a merger, $3,000 for a bracelet. Where is it, Brandon? Where is my bracelet? Vanessa, please calm down. Brandon's voice was frantic, muffled. I can explain. It was for a client. Corporate hospitality. Corporate hospitality doesn't wear lingerie from Victoria's Secret. I heard the sound of paper being ripped. You spent our savings on a mistress while I was begging my parents for loans. You let the house go into foreclosure so you could play big shot with some tramp honey. Please not now, Brandon begged. The guests will be here in 2 hours. The notary is coming. We have to be united. We need the old man to sign. If we don't get the house, we are dead. Do you understand? The Ivanovs will kill us. I don't care if they kill you, Vanessa shouted. In fact, I might help them. You are going to fix this, Brandon. You are going to get that signature, you are going to sell this house, and you are going to give me half. And then I am leaving you, and I am taking everything that isn't nailed down. I heard a crash like a vase shattering against a wall. Then silence. I leaned back on the cot, a cold smile spreading across my face. The foundation was cracking. The united front was gone. They were two rats in a trap turning on each other before the cage even closed. Brandon would be desperate now. He would be terrified. He would be sloppy. He would be so focused on managing his angry wife and his looming debt that he wouldn't notice the old man in the corner. He wouldn't notice the wire. He wouldn't notice the trap until it snapped shut around his neck. I checked my watch. 5:00. 2 hours until showtime. I stood up and walked to the small mirror in the corner of the storage room. I looked at my reflection. I looked tired. My gray hair was messy, my eyes sunken. I looked like a victim. Perfect. I splashed some water on my face. I adjusted my collar. "Get ready, Wallace," I whispered to the man in the mirror. "You have one last performance to give. Make it count. For Beatrice. For Leo. For yourself. Tonight the King family dynasty ends, and from the ashes something new will rise. Something clean." I sat back down on the cot and listened to the tense silence above. The air in the house was thick with hate. It smelled of gunpowder and impending doom. And I was the one holding the match. The silence in the basement was heavy, pressing against my eardrums like water. It was 3 a.m, the dead hour when the world holds its breath. Upstairs, the screaming match had ended hours ago, leaving behind a residue of tension that seeped through the floorboards. I lay on the cot fully dressed, my eyes fixed on the sliver of light beneath the door at the top of the stairs. I knew he was coming. I could feel it. Brandon was not the type to leave loose ends before a big show. He needed to make sure his star attraction was docile, compliant, and barely conscious for the morning performance. I heard the soft creak of the 3rd step. He was trying to be quiet. It was a sound I knew well from when he was a teenager sneaking in past curfew. Back then, I would smile in the dark, happy he was home safe. Now that same sound made my hand instinctively reach for the cold steel of the recording device in my pocket. I clicked it on. The lock tumbled. The door opened slowly, pushing a wedge of yellow hallway light into my gray prison. Brandon stood there, silhouetted against the brightness. He held a steaming mug in his hand. The steam curled around his fingers, innocent and domestic. "Dad," he whispered, his voice soft. "Are you awake?" I let out a groggy moan, shifting on the thin mattress. I rubbed my eyes, feigning the confusion of the deep sleep I had not actually tasted in days. "Brandon," I mumbled, my voice thick. "Is it morning? Is Beatrice making breakfast?" "Not yet." "Dad," Brandon said, descending the stairs. "It is late. I heard you tossing and turning. I thought you might want something to help you settle down." He walked over to the cot. He loomed over me, casting a long shadow that swallowed me whole. He held out the mug. It was my favorite mug, the one with the chip on the rim that I had used for 20 years. "Here," he said. "Warm milk with honey. Mom used to make this for you, remember? It will help you sleep." I sat up, my movements slow and stiff. I reached for the mug with a trembling hand. The heat radiated through the ceramic. It smelled of milk and honey, but underneath the sweetness there was a faint chemical acridity. He had crushed the pills. He had dissolved the sedatives into the drink meant to comfort me. "Thank you, son," I said, my voice cracking. "You are a good boy, always looking after your old dad." I lifted the mug to my lips. I saw his eyes lock onto my throat, waiting for the swallow, waiting for the drugs to enter my system and erase my will. I tilted the mug, but I kept my lips pressed tight. I let a little liquid touch my tongue, just enough to taste the bitterness of betrayal, then I pulled it away. It is too hot, I said, lowering the mug to my lap. I need to let it cool for a minute. Drink it while it is warm. Dad. Brandon urged, a flicker of impatience crossing his face. It works better that way. I will, I promised. I just need to use the little boy's room first. My bladder isn't what it used to be. I stood up, clutching the mug. Brandon took a step back, watching me with eyes that were cold and assessing. Make it quick, he said. I will wait here to take the cup back. I don't want you spilling it. I shuffled toward the corner of the basement, where the old utility sink and a rusted toilet were installed behind a thin partition. It was an indignity he forced me to use, but tonight it was my salvation. I stepped behind the screen. I poured the milk into the soil of a large potted ficus plant that Beatrice had brought down here to winterize months ago. The dry earth drank the white liquid, greedily burying the poison in the roots. I waited 10 seconds, flushing the toilet to cover any sound. I walked back out, wiping my mouth with the back of my hand. That is better, I said, giving a weak smile. I feel sleepy already. Did you drink it? Brandon asked, looking at the empty mug in my hand. Every drop, I lied. It was delicious, just like Beatrice made. I handed him the mug. He took it, inspecting the bottom to make sure it was empty. A look of relief washed over his face. It was the relief of a man who thought he had just solved his last problem. Good, he said. Now lie down. You have a big day tomorrow. You need to be rested. I lay back on the cot. I closed my eyes. I let my breathing deepen, slowing the rhythm until it mimicked the heavy slumber of the medicated. I waited. I expected him to leave. I expected him to turn off the light and go back to his wife and his schemes. But he did not leave. I felt his presence lingering by the cot. I felt his gaze burning into my face. He was watching me. He was waiting for the drugs to take hold. Minutes passed. I kept my body limp, my face slack. I drooled a little onto the pillow, selling the performance with every ounce of discipline I had left as an auditor. Then he spoke. It was a whisper, barely louder than a breath, but in the silence of the basement it sounded like a shout. You useless old man. My heart skipped a beat, but I did not flinch. I kept my eyes shut. Look at you, he hissed, lying there in your own filth. You are pathetic. You have always been pathetic. Pinching pennies, counting coupons, driving that rust bucket car. You embarrassed me my whole life. I lay there paralyzed by the venom in his voice. This was not the frustration of a desperate man. This was deep-seated hatred. This was a rot that had been festering for years. You should have died with her, Brandon whispered, leaning closer until I could smell the scotch on his breath. It would have been so much cleaner. One funeral, one sale. But no, you had to hang on. You had to be a burden until the very end. He laughed, a low, cruel sound. Enjoy the bed, Dad. Because tomorrow night, you won't be sleeping here. As soon as that notary stamps the paper, I am driving you to Sunnyside myself. And I am not paying for the private room. You are going to the ward, the one with the screaming lunatics and the smell of urine. You will fit right in. He stood up. I heard the rustle of his suit jacket. You served your purpose, he said, his voice retreating toward the stairs. You saved my life. That is the only good thing you ever did for me. He climbed the stairs. He turned off the light, plunging me back into darkness. He locked the door. I lay there in the silence, tears leaking from my closed eyes. They were not tears of sadness. They were tears of finality. For 40 years I had loved him. I had excused his selfishness. I had bailed him out. I had told myself he was just finding his way. I had held on to the hope that somewhere inside the man was the little boy who used to hold my hand crossing the street. But that boy was dead. He had died a long time ago, replaced by this monster who wished for my death, who called me useless, who planned to discard me like trash. The last thread of fatherly love inside me snapped. It severed with a clean, sharp pain, leaving behind a hollow space. And into that space rushed a cold, hard resolve. I sat up in the darkness. I wiped the tears from my face. I reached for the phone. I did not hesitate. I did not tremble. My fingers were steady as I typed the message to Jonathan Pierce. He stood over me tonight. He wished I was dead. He confessed everything. I paused, looking at the glowing screen. Activate the destruction plan, I typed. Burn it all down. I hit send. I watched the message deliver. I watched the read receipt appear. It was done. The father was gone. Only the auditor remained. And tomorrow I was going to audit Brandon King's life down to the last cent. I lay back on the cot, but this time I did not pretend to sleep. I stared into the dark, plotting my opening line for the party. I rehearsed the tone of my voice. I visualized the look on his face when the trap snapped shut. He wanted me to die. He wanted me gone. I would grant his wish. Wallace, the victim, died tonight in this basement. The man who would walk up those stairs tomorrow was someone Brandon had never met. And that man was going to bring the apocalypse. The crystal chandeliers in the grand foyer were blazing with enough voltage to light a small city. The house I had bought with modest savings 30 years ago had been transformed into a grotesque temple of vanity. Brandon and Vanessa had spared no expense for my execution. There were servers in white tuxedo jackets weaving through the crowd with trays of caviar and champagne. A string quartet was playing Mozart in the corner, drowning out the nervous laughter of the guests. I stood by the staircase wearing the suit they had laid out for me. It was a little loose around the collar, emphasizing my frailty. Vanessa stood next to me, her hand gripping my elbow with a force that was meant to look supportive but felt like a shackle. She was wearing a red dress that screamed for attention, her neck dripping with diamonds that I knew were leased. "Smile, Wallace," she hissed into my ear, her voice sugary sweet for the benefit of the woman standing nearby. "It is your big night. Try not to look like a funeral mute." I blinked rapidly, letting my mouth hang slightly open. "Is Beatrice here?" I mumbled loud enough for the woman to hear. She promised she would wear the blue pearls. The woman looked at me with pity, then looked at Vanessa with admiration. "You are a saint for taking care of him," the woman whispered. "My mother had dementia. It is a full-time job." Vanessa sighed dramatically. "We do what we must for family. He gets confused, but we love him." I let them talk. My eyes scanned the room. It was a sea of predators. I recognized some of the faces from the dossier Jonathan Pierce had compiled. There was the crooked real estate developer Brandon was trying to impress. There were the high rollers from the underground poker games. And standing near the back by the kitchen door was a man with a scar over his eyebrow sipping sparkling water. The Ivanov enforcer. He was not here for the canapes. He was here to make sure the asset transfer happened on schedule. Brandon was working the room like a politician. He was laughing, shaking hands, clapping men on the back. He looked confident, but I could see the tremor in his hand when he raised his glass. He was terrified. He knew that if I did not sign that paper tonight, he would not leave this party alive. The music stopped. Brandon walked to the small stage they had erected in the living room. He tapped a spoon against his champagne flute. The sharp ring silenced the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," Brandon boomed, his voice projecting with practiced charisma. "Thank you all for coming tonight. We are here to celebrate family. We are here to celebrate legacy." He gestured toward me. "My father, Wallace King, built this home with his own hands. He worked hard his whole life. But as many of you know, his health has declined since my mother passed. It has been hard on all of us. But tonight, Dad wants to ensure that the King legacy lives on. He wants to pass the torch." The crowd applauded politely. Vanessa squeezed my arm. That is your cue, she whispered. Do not mess this up, old man, or you go straight to the basement without supper. She guided me toward the stage. I shuffled my feet, exaggerating every step, stooping my shoulders, until I looked like I was carrying the weight of the world. Brandon reached down and helped me up the single step. He hugged me. It was a show for the audience, but I could feel his heart racing against his chest. Just sign the paper, Dad, he whispered into my ear, his voice trembling with suppressed panic. And this nightmare is over. He led me to a small antique desk placed center stage. On it sat the document, the deed of transfer, and next to it, the durable power of attorney. A notary sat nearby, stamp ready. I sat in the chair. I looked out at the crowd. They were watching me with a mix of boredom and greed. They were waiting for the old man to sign away his life so they could get back to the open bar. Brandon placed a heavy gold pen in my hand. Right here, Dad, he said, pointing to the line. Just your signature, like we practiced. I held the pen. I let my hand shake uncontrollably. The tip of the pen tapped against the paper, making a staccato rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. I cannot see it, I stammered. The letters are moving. Beatrice, where are my glasses? A ripple of unease went through the crowd. The Ivanov enforcer stepped forward slightly, his hand sliding into his jacket pocket. You do not need glasses, Dad, Brandon said, his smile straining at the edges. Just sign where my finger is, right here. For Beatrice. Do it for Beatrice. He said her name. He used her name to manipulate me one last time. That was the spark. That was the signal. I stopped shaking. I froze. My hand became as steady as a stone. I looked up at Brandon. I looked him dead in the eye. And for the first time in a week, I let him see me. I let him see the auditor. I let him see the man who had balanced books for 40 years and never missed a penny. The confusion vanished from my face like smoke in a strong wind. My jaw set. My posture straightened. I sat up in the chair, expanding my chest, shedding the skin of the frail old victim. I dropped the pen. It clattered onto the desk, loud in the sudden silence. I reached out and grabbed the microphone from the stand. Brandon tried to stop me, but I was faster. I stood up. I did not use the table for support. I stood tall. I am not signing this, Brandon, I said, my voice booming through the speakers, clear and deep and powerful. The room gasped. Brandon's face went white. Dad, what are you doing? He hissed, reaching for the mic. Sit down. You are confused. I am not confused, I roared, pulling the mic away. I have never been more lucid in my life. I turned to the crowd. I looked at the bankers, the lawyers, the criminals. My son wants me to sign a transfer of assets, I said, my voice cutting through the tension like a razor. He told you I am senile. He told you I have dementia. He told you I need his protection. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I pulled out a thick envelope. I ripped it open. But I am not signing a transfer. I continued holding the papers up for everyone to see. I am signing an arrest warrant. Brandon lunged for me. Dad, stop. I sidestepped him. I threw the papers onto the desk. These are not deeds, I shouted. These are affidavits. This is a confession, Brandon. I pointed a finger at him, a finger that did not tremble. I know about the $500,000 you owe the Ivanov syndicate. The crowd erupted into murmurs. The enforcer at the back turned and walked briskly toward the exit, pulling his phone out. I know about the $20,000 your wife stole from my dying wife's credit card to buy a handbag. I continued pointing at Vanessa, who was frozen near the stairs, her face a mask of horror. And I know about the $5,000 you paid Dr. Aris Zorek to falsify a medical report, declaring me incompetent, I said, my voice rising to a crescendo. I know you plan to sell this house to pay your gambling debts. I know you plan to throw me into a state facility to rot. Brandon stood center stage, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. He looked at the crowd. He is lying. He screamed, his voice cracking. He is crazy. Look at him. He thinks he is an auditor. It is the dementia. Is it? I asked calmly. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small remote control Jonathan had given me. Then let's look at the evidence. I pressed the button. The giant projection screen behind me, which had been displaying a slideshow of family photos, flickered. The image changed. It was not a photo. It was a document, high resolution, crystal clear. It was the medical report from Dr. Zorek, the one declaring me a vegetable. And next to it, side by side, was a bank transfer receipt from Brandon's account to Dr. Zorek's personal offshore holding. Dated yesterday. Amount $5,000. The crowd went silent again. The evidence was 50 feet tall. And this, I said, pressing the button again. The screen changed. It was a video. Grainy night vision footage from inside the master bedroom. It was the video from the night before. Brandon and Vanessa screaming at each other. I don't care if they kill you. Vanessa's voice boomed through the speakers, distorted but undeniable. You are going to get that signature. You are going to sell this house, and you are going to give me half. The guests stared in shock. This was not a senile rant. This was a public execution. I turned to Brandon. He was shaking. He looked like a man who had just realized he was standing on a trapdoor. You wanted a signature, son? I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You wanted me to sign my name in front of everyone. I picked up the gold pen. I picked up the arrest warrant affidavit I had placed on the table. I signed it. Wallace King. A signature with a flourish, strong and defiant. I held it up. Signed, sealed, and delivered, I said. Now get off my stage. Brandon looked at me. He looked at the screen. He looked at the guests who were now pulling out their phones, recording the downfall of the King family. He made a sound, a low animal growl of desperation. He looked at the door. He was thinking about running, but he couldn't run, because the front doors swung open with a crash, and standing there, framed by the night, was not the police. Not yet. It was Sierra, and she was holding Leo, and she looked like she was ready to burn the world down. The giant screen behind me flickered again. The video of Vanessa screaming about the mortgage vanished, replaced by a new image. This one was static, but it hit harder than any moving picture could. It was a bank statement, a high-resolution scan of a loan application dated 3 months ago. The applicant name was Beatrice King, but the signature at the bottom was a clumsy forgery, a jagged scrawl that looked nothing like my wife's elegant script. Beneath it was the loan amount, $500,000. And the lender listed was North Star Holdings, a shell company, known by everyone in the financial underworld as a front for the Ivanov syndicate. I pointed at the screen, my finger steady. You stole her identity, I said, my voice booming over the murmurs of the crowd. You took out a loan against her life insurance while she was still alive. You forged her name to pay your gambling debts. Brandon stood frozen on the stage, his face the color of ash. He looked like a man watching his own autopsy. That is a lie, he croaked, his voice barely audible. That is Photoshop, is it? I asked. The screen changed again. Now it was an audio waveform, a jagged blue line on a black background. I pressed the play button on the remote. The sound of the basement filled the room, amplified by the expensive speakers Brandon had rented to impress his friends. The audio was crystal clear. It was the recording from the night before. You useless old man, Brandon's voice snarled through the speakers. You should have died with her. It would have been so much cleaner. one funeral, one sale. But no, you had to hang on. The room went deathly silent. The clinking of glasses stopped. The whispers died. Every eye was fixed on Brandon. The guests, the wealthy investors, the social climbers, they were all staring at him with a mixture of horror and revulsion. They had come to celebrate a dutiful son taking care of his ailing father. Instead, they were witnessing a monster unmasked. "You wished me dead," I said, my voice quiet, but cutting through the silence like a knife. "You stood over me in the dark and wished for your own father to die so you could cash a check." Vanessa snapped. The shock that had paralyzed her broke, replaced by a frantic feral panic. She realized the ship was sinking and she was trying to bail water with a sieve. "Turn it off!" she shrieked, rushing toward the laptop connected to the projector. "He is crazy. He is hacking the system. This is all fake. It is deepfake AI." She clawed at the cables, ripping them from the ports. The screen went black. The audio cut out with a sharp pop. There she panted, turning to face the crowd, her chest heaving, her eyes wild. "Do not listen to him. The dementia makes him paranoid. He invents things. We love him. We are just trying to protect him." She was good. Even now, cornered and exposed, she was trying to spin the narrative. She smoothed her red dress, putting on a trembling smile. "Please, everyone, enjoy the champagne. My father-in-law is just having an episode. We will get him his medication." It was a valiant effort, but it was futile, because I wasn't done. "I have one more witness," I said. I did not need the microphone. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Vanessa looked at me, her eyes narrowing. "What witness? You have nobody. You are alone." I looked past her toward the double doors at the back of the room. "Am I?" he asked. The doors swung open. They hit the walls with a heavy thud that made half the guests jump. Sierra stood in the doorway. She was wearing a simple black dress that I had paid for. Her hair was pulled back. She looked fierce. She looked like an avenging angel. And in her arms she held Leo, my grandson. She did not look at the crowd. She did not look at me. She looked straight at Brandon. She walked into the room. The crowd parted for her like the Red Sea. They didn't know who she was, but they sensed the power of her anger. The click of her heels on the hardwood floor was the only sound in the house. "Brandon," she called out, her voice shaking with rage. Brandon's knees buckled. He grabbed the edge of the table to hold himself up. "Sierra," he whispered, "what are you doing here?" Sierra stopped 10 feet from the stage. She adjusted the baby on her hip. She pointed a finger at Brandon. "You told me this house was empty," she shouted. "You told me your parents were dead." A gasp rippled through the room. Vanessa's head whipped around. She looked at Sierra, then at Brandon, then back at Sierra. Her eyes locked onto the baby. She saw the nose. She saw the chin. She saw the undeniable truth. "You told me you were selling this house for us," Sierra continued, tears streaming down her face. "You said the money was for Leo. You said we were going to Italy." She reached into her purse and pulled out a stack of papers. She threw them into the air. They fluttered down like snow. Copies of the texts. Copies of the eviction notice from her apartment. "You told me you loved me," she screamed, "and then you sold me to the mob." The accusation hung in the air, heavy and toxic. Vanessa walked slowly toward Sierra. She looked at the baby again. Then she looked at Brandon. Her face was pale, her lips a thin white line. "Who is this Brandon?" she asked, her voice dangerously calm. "Who is this woman? And why does that baby have your ears?" Brandon stammered. "Vanessa, please. It is not what it looks like. She is crazy. She is just some girl I met." "Some girl," Sierra yelled. "I am the mother of your son." She turned to Vanessa. He has been paying my rent for 2 years, she spat, until 3 months ago, when he told me he needed the money to pay off his gambling debts. He told me his wife was a cold bitch who only cared about status. He told me he was leaving you as soon as the old man kicked the bucket. The room exploded. The guests were no longer polite observers. They were witnessing a train wreck, and they couldn't look away. Phones were raised, recording every second. This was the end of Brandon's social standing, the end of his business, the end of his life as he knew it. Vanessa turned to Brandon. The calm was gone. In its place was a fury so pure, it was terrifying. "You called me a bitch," she screeched. "You spent our savings on her while I was begging my father for a loan." She lunged at him. It wasn't a slap. It was a tackle. Vanessa hit Brandon with the force of a linebacker. They crashed into the table, sending the champagne glasses flying. They hit the floor in a tangle of limbs and expensive fabric. "You bastard," Vanessa screamed, clawing at his face. "You ruined me." Brandon tried to push her off. "Get off me, you psycho." Sierra stepped forward. She didn't help him. She didn't help her. She reached into the diaper bag hanging from her shoulder. She pulled out a dirty diaper, a heavy one, and she threw it. It hit Brandon square in the face just as he managed to push Vanessa away. "That is for Leo," she shouted. Chaos erupted. The string quartet packed up their instruments and fled. The caterers abandoned their trays. The guests were scrambling for the exits, trying to escape the blast zone of the King family implosion. I stood on the stage watching it all. I felt like a captain watching his ship go down, only I wasn't on the ship. I was on the shore watching it burn. I looked at Jonathan Pierce, who was standing near the door. He gave me a grim smile and held up his phone. He mouthed one word: "Police." I nodded. I looked down at my son. He was lying on the floor, covered in wine and filth, his wife screaming at him, his mistress cursing him, his friends abandoning him. He looked up at me. His eyes were wide with terror. "Dad," he pleaded, reaching a hand out toward me. "Dad, help me." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had poisoned his mother, the man who had planned to bury me alive. I leaned down into the microphone one last time. "I am not your dad," I said, my voice echoing through the ruined hall. "I am the witness." And then the sirens began to wail in the distance, getting closer and closer, coming to wash the garbage away. The flashing lights of the police cruisers illuminated the grand foyer through the tall windows, painting the room in chaotic strobes of red and blue. The sound of sirens cut off, replaced by the heavy tread of boots on the marble floor. In the center of the room, the brawl had turned into a spectacle of pure destruction. Vanessa was a whirlwind of rage, her perfectly manicured nails now weapons. She lunged at Brandon, tearing at his suit, screaming about the lost money, the humiliation, the years wasted on a fraud. "You bankrupted us," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You promised me a penthouse, and you gave me a prison sentence." Brandon shoved her hard. She stumbled back, crashing into a waiter who dropped a tray of crystal flutes. Glass shattered everywhere, glittering like diamonds in the mess. "Get away from me, you psycho!" Brandon roared, wiping blood from a scratch on his cheek. "You spent $20,000 on a bag while I was trying to save our lives. This is on you." And then Sierra made her move. She reached into the diaper bag again. This time she pulled out a baby bottle half full of formula. She didn't throw it. She walked up to Vanessa, who was trying to stand up amidst the broken glass, and uncapped it. "You called my son a bastard," Sierra said calmly. She poured the milk over Vanessa's head. The white liquid soaked her expensive hair, dripped down her face, ruining her makeup, staining her red dress. Vanessa gasped, sputtering. "You trash! Police, nobody move!" A team of officers burst through the double doors. They were not the local patrol. They were wearing vests that said Major Crimes Unit. Jonathan Pierce had called in the heavy artillery. Brandon froze. He looked at the cops, then at the back door. He took a step. Don't even think about it, a sergeant barked, leveling a taser. Brandon King, you are under arrest. Two officers grabbed him. They slammed him against the wall, not gently. I heard the cuffs click. What are the charges? Brandon yelled, struggling. This is a family dispute. Fraud, grand larceny, forgery, and assault, the sergeant listed off. And we have a few questions about a loan from the Ivanov syndicate. They are very interested in talking to you too. Brandon's face went slack. He stopped fighting. He knew it was over. Another officer approached Vanessa, who was wiping milk from her eyes. Vanessa King, he said. You are also under arrest. For what? She screamed. I am the victim here. He lied to me, elder abuse, conspiracy to defraud, and accessory to grand larceny, the officer said. We have recordings of you discussing locking your father-in-law in a freezing basement. We have photos of the conditions he was living in. That is a felony, ma'am. They cuffed her. She started sobbing, loud, ugly tears that moved no one. I watched them being dragged toward the door. My son and his wife. The people who were supposed to care for me in my old age. They looked small. They looked pathetic. As they passed the stage, Brandon looked up. His eyes met mine. They were filled with a mixture of hate and begging. Dad! He said, his voice cracking. Dad, please. Call them off. I can fix this. I will pay you back. I swear. Just tell them it was a mistake. I stepped down from the stage. I walked over to him. I looked down at the son who had wished me dead. Don't call me Dad, I said, my voice steady and cold. And don't call me for bail. I leaned in close so only he could hear. Attorney Fletcher will see you in court, and he is going to take everything you have left, which is nothing. The officers shoved him forward. He disappeared into the night, followed by Vanessa wailing about her ruined dress. I stood alone in the center of the ruined party. The guests had fled. The music was gone. There was only the sound of Sierra cooing to Leo and the distant wail of the sirens fading away. It was over. The cancer was cut out. Jonathan Pierce walked over and handed me a glass of water. Well done, Wallace, he said. I took the water. My hand was shaking now just a little. Not from fear. From relief. Is it done? I asked. Jonathan nodded. The bank has frozen their assets. The house sale is blocked. And the DA has the recordings. They are going away for a long time. I looked at Sierra. She was smiling at me through tears. Thank you, she mouthed. I nodded. I looked around the empty hall. It was just a house now, just wood and stone. The memories of Beatrice were not here. They were in my heart. I am ready to go, I said. Where? Jonathan asked. To the ocean, I said. Beatrice always wanted to see the ocean. The salt spray hits my face cold and clean, washing away the stale air of the courtroom and the suffocating smell of that basement. I am standing on the teak deck of a 40-foot cruiser. I named her the Beatrice. She is not the biggest boat in the marina, but she is sturdy, she is elegant, and she is mine, paid for in cash. I sold the house 3 weeks ago. I did not even walk through it one last time. I told the real estate agent to sell it, as is furniture and all. I did not want the memories. I did not want the ghosts of my son and his wife haunting the hallways. The check cleared yesterday. $400,000 added to the $10 million Jonathan Pierce transferred from Beatrice's phantom stock. It is a lot of money. Enough to buy anything I want. But the one thing I wanted most money could not buy. Peace. And now finally I have it. I read the news alert on my tablet this morning while drinking my coffee on the open water. The sentencing hearing was short. The evidence was overwhelming. The judge called their actions repugnant. Brandon and Vanessa were sentenced to 12 years each in federal prison. Fraud, elder abuse conspiracy. The charges piled up like stones on a grave. I did not go to the sentencing. I did not send a letter. I did not send a lawyer. I am done with them. They wanted to lock me away so now they can experience the hospitality of the state. They have 12 years to think about the price of greed. 12 years to realize that the old man they underestimated was the one holding the keys all along. I saw Sierra before I set sail. I met her at a diner near the safe house. She looked better, cleaner, stronger. Leo was awake, looking around with curious eyes. I handed her a thick envelope. Inside were the documents for a trust fund. "This is for Leo," I told her. "It covers his education, his medical bills, and a stipend for his clothes and food until he is 21. He will never go hungry. He will never be desperate." She reached for my hand, tears in her eyes. "Thank you, Wallace. You are saving us. I do not know how to repay you." I pulled my hand back gently. "You repay me by being a mother," I said. "I am not adopting you, Sierra. I am not your father, and I am not your bank. I paid your rent for a year, and I bought you a reliable car. The rest is up to you. You have a job interview tomorrow. Do not miss it." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I won't, I promise. I believe her. She has something Brandon never had. She has hit rock bottom and survived. She knows the value of the climb." I put on my dark sunglasses, shielding my eyes from the glare of the sun off the Pacific. I pick up the crystal glass of vintage wine from the table. It is an expensive bottle, the kind Brandon used to buy with my stolen money to impress his fake friends. Now I drink it because I like the taste. I look out at the horizon where the blue of the ocean meets the blue of the sky. There is no land in sight. There are no walls, no basements, no lies. I raise the glass toward the heavens. "Here is to you, Beatrice," I whisper. "We cleaned house, my love. The books are balanced. The debt is paid." I take a sip. The wine is perfect. I turn the wheel, steering the Beatrice toward the open sea. The engine hums a low, powerful song of freedom. For 71 years, I lived for everyone else. I was a husband. I was a father. I was an auditor. I smile, letting the wind mess up my hair. Now the real life begins. The biggest lesson I learned is that blood makes you relatives, but only loyalty makes you family. For years, I mistook my son's greed for need and my own silence for patience. Brandon and Vanessa made the fatal mistake of assuming that age equals weakness, thinking they could discard me like an old receipt. But they forgot that an auditor always balances the books. True power isn't about shouting. It's about having the discipline to wait for the perfect moment to strike. Never let anyone strip you of your dignity, even if they share your last name. Sometimes cutting ties is the only way to survive. If you believe justice was served today, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories of revenge and redemption. Let me know in the comments. Would you have forgiven them, or would you have pressed the button just like I did?